This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Hello, and welcome to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer. Today, we are going to be talking about stress and burnout in schools, and hopefully finding some ways to manage some of the demands of the job.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
They don't understand. They're not in the classrooms every day. They don't see the strain we're under. Now, that is not a quote taken from any random staff room in school across the country, although it could be. That was Professor McGonagall from Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, reflecting, no doubt, on some of the stresses and strains of the teaching job, be it in real life or in magical schools. So I picked that quote because I think it's a nice way to introduce today's topic, where we're opening up a conversation that's becoming harder and harder to ignore: burnout and stress in schools. From long hours and rising demands to emotional exhaustion and invisible pressures, teachers and students are often feeling the strain of being in school. So today, I and my host, Ginny Lee, are going to be talking honestly about some of the challenges of the demands placed on teachers and children, and exploring some real ways to restore balance in our schools. And just before I bring Ginny on and we have our conversation, I'm going to refer to some recent up-to-date figures from the government about teacher retention in state schools in the UK. And I want you to have these in mind because I think they frame the topic and show how important it is. Obviously, stress is not the only thing that's going to affect teacher retention, but it will definitely be a very important factor. So the latest data says that after 1 year after qualifying, roughly 9 out of 10 teachers are still in service. Great. But then there's a decline. After 3 years, it falls to about 75%. So 3 out of every 4 teachers are still in service. And after 5 years, there's a further decline to where around 2/3 of teachers are still teaching 5 years after they qualify. And what's really interesting, because I was kind of aware of those figures and I sort of knew roughly what they were, but I actually looked at the data over the last 15 years. And what's really interesting is there's almost no change whatsoever. You might think, since the pandemic, there's been a huge, and maybe there has been some effect. But of course, if we're talking about 5 years or even longer, that effect is yet to be felt. But certainly when we look at data from 2010 right to the current day, it's amazing to me just how stubborn the rates of retention are. And by stubborn, I obviously mean stubbornly low. People will change jobs, people will leave the career. Okay, I get that. But 1/3 of teachers going and doing something totally different from teaching within 5 years of qualifying, that suggests to me a system where everything is not as it should be. So I'm going to bring in my guest, Ginny Lee, in a moment. I'm going to explain that I had this conversation with Ginny earlier this week. We recorded it. He actually was the one who suggested the topic to me. And as you'll hear in the recording, he does a brilliant job of explaining why.
Hello and welcome to the Saturday Social with me, Will Mercer. This week I am joined by my fellow teacher, Ginny Lee. Hello Ginny, how are you?
I'm good, Will. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Had a good week?
Had a good week. Pretty good week. Pretty exhausted from everything that's happening on in school. Lots of events at the moment, but it's worthwhile. Busy is good.
End of term, things get a bit hectic, right?
Yeah.
You know, things pile up.
Yeah.
Right. So today we're talking about, well, actually, rather than me introduce the topic, I'm going to throw it over to you because, full disclosure, you were the one who came up with this. You came to me, you said, I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Tell us what we're talking about and why we're talking about it.
I came up with the idea of burnout because, one, I am very, very guilty of it at times. I put myself in burnout situations at times. I have suffered from burnout. I've seen people suffer from burnout, and I've seen pupils and students suffer from burnout. So I think it's a pretty relevant topic, especially at this part of the end of the year that is exam time. It's really stressful time for children. I think it's really important that there needs to be conversation about it, really.
You talk about pupils, teachers there. Now, what if someone said, isn't burnout just stress? Is it the same thing?
I don't think so. Burnout is like you're pushing yourself through that stress. You're pushing yourself through anything. You're tired. You might be sleeping 6 or 7 hours a day, but if you're waking up incredibly tired, that can't be stress. That has to be something else. That has to be you're just overtired. You're not happy anymore, and you're doing the same things.
Well, people talk about good stress.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like everyone gets good stress. You know,
Yeah.
you've got to do some public speaking, or you've got some big thing going on at work with high pressure. But actually, you know, it makes you rise to the challenge. But you're talking about something different. You're saying no. In schools, quite often, it's not that people are just being pushed to perform well, but something bad is happening, something worse is going on.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day in my, as I call it, the thought chamber. I was thinking about how do high performance in sports and or music and or performing arts and or academics help. They obviously we want them to perform, but do we consider the other side of it after the performance? How do we support the children to get back to level ground or like net zero? We push them to be 100, then what happens after those exams, those performances, those matches are all done? How do we help them go back into normal life and normal learning? Or do we expect them to perform at that level their entire life in school? So
Right. So, you know, athletes, they have the training season, right?
Yeah.
But the off season, you have to give thought to that.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about it as teachers. So, obviously, your background, PE teaching.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
It looks like, for me at the moment, I'm doing 7 days a week at the moment, but it's a busy time of the year. And I'm guilty of pushing the kids to perform well because I feel I'm competitive in nature, and I'm also like, I want them to do well, and I don't want to fail them, so there's a part of that. It's also in me, I think, if I reflect on it, I'm pushing myself to the limit to, one, grow the school in that area, and also give the pupils the option and the experiences that I got as a kid, as a adolescence and a child, that I could compete and find an identity in something within school, because I wasn't an academic like some of these children. I was more on the sporting side.
I get it. So you get some kids who, they might think, oh, I don't shine, like, you know, in exams or in the classroom or whatever, so the team or the orchestra or whatever, that's my thing, and then there's extra pressure to work with that. Okay, I get that. But if we talk about staff for a moment, what do you think for teachers and burnout? I mean, is it workload? I mean, what causes it? Is it just a workload thing? Is it a external pressure thing from like SLT or whatever? Or, you know, where does teacher burnout come from then?
I think teacher burnout comes from, It's mostly internal, I think. I think, to be fair, the message here is you do your job and then you get out. And you do your hours and you get out. You're not expected to do more than what you need to do. And I appreciate that, but then it's also, I think, the individual. If you want to strive to be a high performance teacher or a high performance athlete or high performance, like if you want to get good grades and a good reputation and further your career, I think you need to be able to push yourself in some type of way and perform in that, or help, or be seen to be being active in that area. I think it's also, I guess that's extrinsic and internal. Intrinsic, I think. But from me,
is it a personality thing?
I think it is a personality thing. I think people from my background, I think I've grown up with a bunch of workaholics, so then I just put the same what I've seen as a child that into work now, and I kind of don't know when to switch off and when to switch on, really. So.
Well, it's tricky, because I guess if we are asking kids to, perform, I'm not going to say 110%, but you know what I mean. Like, if we're asking kids to give their best and to really work hard and to learn and blah, 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 then how much attention do we have to pay to, is this well-being we're talking about? Is that what it is? Or because I bring up well-being. I was in a job interview once, and I think there was a question about, it was something to do with leadership, and it was like, how do you look after a team or something like that? And the person asked me the question, she goes, oh, can you look after a team and stop stress becoming unbearable, but don't use the word well-being, please? And she laughed about it, and she clearly thought well-being was like a dirty word, right? Was it something that I can only guess why she said that. I'm not sure I agree necessarily, but I'm gonna guess she said that because it's so often done badly. I mean, the sort of joke about it is SLT might say something like, hi, we know everyone's been really pushed really hard this term, but we've ordered in a pizza for us. Or hey, there's a cake in the staff room, first come, first serve. And that's to say thank you because everyone's worked a weekend recently or something like that. And I think people think that's just a bit condescending, and therefore they hate the idea. They come to regard the idea of well-being as a bit of a cynical thing management come up with to sort of as a way to sort of force people into doing more work than they really should be doing. But I think there is a way to do well-being well, but I mean, what would that look like?
If I was thinking about now, well-being in staff, we expect it's like, for you example, your class was just in a show. You put all this extra time into it, but then they also have these assessments that they have to do at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
How are you supposed to focus on something that is really what the kids are really passionate about, but also they're going to do assessments within the same week, and you're expected to wake up refreshed and be able to teach, but then also have a long day ahead of you, knowing that the children are not going to listen, but they need to listen.
Assessments, okay, here's an interesting one. So just a bit of context here. Jenny's talking about some assessments we recently did. My class is year 4, but they were some online maths and English assessments children were doing on laptops, and it was right from year 1 up to year 6. And it was really interesting because different teachers said different things about what we should tell the kids before we did them. Some teachers, they go to the end of, we don't tell them, we don't use the word test. That's like a dirty word. We don't use the word assessment. We just say to the children, oh, this is just an activity we're going to do, and we're going to see, it's just for my information, you're not being judged in any way. And that's one way to do it, and I totally understand why teachers do that, because I think they feel, especially when they're very young, they shouldn't have that pressure put on them. But I don't know, I mean, maybe it's just like I teach year 4 and they are in the middle, they're a bit older. I'm a little bit sceptical of that. I think the word test doesn't have to be that negative. as long as you don't treat it that negatively.
Yeah.
You know, like a test in itself, you can get an answer wrong, but as long as no one's freaking out about you getting the answer wrong, I don't see that as necessarily a stressful thing. I think there is a way to be honest with kids and say, oh yeah, we're doing an assessment. We're going to check how well you've understood what's been taught over the year in a way that doesn't, I don't know, isn't going to cause them anxiety or freak them out or anything. And also, I think often adults maybe, like, children are never going to get resilient unless they get practice at overcoming tough things, right? And if you never say, if the first time a child hears the word test is when, I don't know, they do their GCSEs or they go to university or something, I think that's too late to say a test, and to know you're sitting a test. I think you need practice at it at some point in your primary school.
Yeah, it's what I carry with me. One of my lecturers at university said, anxiety only becomes anxiety, the negative anxiety, until an adult that you respect and you care for makes it negative.
Right.
So it goes, if you make a test a negative word or a negative thing, then that child's always going to perceive testing as a negative thing.
Right, right.
So,
and I think we can make it sound negative if we act like it's scary. If we act like, children, the word test is a really scary thing, so I'm going to protect you by calling this a fun activity or whatever. I think that sends out, it's well-intentioned, but it sends out the message that, oh, you can't handle a test, so I'm going to have to dress it up and sugarcoat it and pretend it's something that it's not, because otherwise you won't be able to deal with it. And I think that's doing what you're talking about. That is putting a negative expectation on it.
Yeah, and I also think if you go playing devil's advocate here, we're getting children from local schools because we work in an international school, and they're coming in with the innate reaction to what exams and tests are,
right?
Negatively, because I guess in here, because I'm from Hong Kong, one bad test can ruin your educational life.
Right.
In local schools, I guess you score bad on the test, you're out of your school that you are in, and you go to a worse school, something like that.
It's the stakes behind it, I suppose, isn't it?
There's stakes behind it. That makes it negative. But how are they going to grow and become more resilient if they cannot understand the stakes behind the test and also spin that into a positive light, or be responsible and take accountability of, okay, I didn't study, and I did bad because I didn't study, or I want to study because I want to do well on this test, or just be honest with yourself and your parents and be like, I don't really care about tests. I only care about this other thing I'm really talented at.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you mentioned PE earlier. Well, actually, no, I think I did years ago. But when I think about anxiety getting in the way of performing or doing your best, I think of sports, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I think. So I'll give you, I'm no athlete, but let me give you a tennis example. I remember doing this when I was in school. I remember the serve in tennis is such a pain because it's all silent before you do it, right?
Yeah.
When you're watching in a match, it's all quiet, and for a moment, it's all on you, and you've got to do this quite awkward flip, throw the ball in the air and sort of flick your racket around, and you can practice it. You can do it 100 times, like perfectly at home or whatever. Yeah. And as soon as you feel the pressure is on, it can all go to pieces.
Yeah.
I find that fascinating. As an adult, I still don't really, I can guess, but I still don't really know how to switch that off. I think maybe it can't be switched off. I guess what I'm saying is, I think it's a bit naive to think that you can ever fully get rid of, let's call it, I don't know if anxiety is the right word, but let's call it an anxiety. I don't think you can ever really fully switch that off if what you're doing matters. I think it's more a case of living with it and managing it and trying to not let it affect you rather than it is to eliminate it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It's someone told me before, you can't get rid of energy.
Right.
So energy becomes negative or positive. You can't get rid of it. If you have positive energy, it can turn negative very quick, but you can't get rid of it. Like in a child, let's give an example for a child. If a child comes in hyper and you tell it to sit down and be quiet, that energy is still going to stay the same. So if you let that child, if you know that child is like an energetic child and he's a friend that needs to go outside for a bit before he comes into class, you need to get rid of the energy. I think that's the same thing, right? So like if you have some negative bad energy in your body and you keep on trying to stuff it down, you're not going to be able to get rid of it. Well, you're not going to be able to. You can always confront it and turn it into a positive, but you never turn dark energy into even dark. You can't turn dark energy into light energy until you confront it. You can't just keep it stuff down.
You can't wish it away.
No.
I get that. I once heard them talk about, I once had some advice, I think it was around public speaking, and the idea was something like, take your nervousness and reframe it as excitement. Yeah, you're a bit, you might say, you have a feeling about something coming up, and you might frame it as, I'm terribly nervous about it, but you can sort of you can relabel that as, maybe I'm just very, very excited about it going well.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see it, and it's funny to see it in kids, and I wonder whether this sort of anxiety is always there in children, or whether they sort of learn it. And I go both ways, and I'll give you an example. I saw, actually it was literally this afternoon, I had a child in my class, and this child had brought in a piece of work that needed to go to another teacher in another classroom. So I said, later on, you can just go, pointing to the classroom, you can just go and knock on the door and give it to Mr. So-and-so. And she was really quite scared about doing it, she really was refusing to do it at first. I had to sort of go with her, and then she did it, and then it was all, it was lovely, it was all absolutely fine, of course it was. But I was watching her thinking, to me, it felt a little performative. I thought to myself, I don't think you are really scared here. I think you are just almost pretending to be. Now, maybe that's rubbish. Maybe, I don't know, of course. I'm just trying to guess. But I sometimes think you see with kids nowadays, sometimes it's like they're almost pretending to be a bit more, I don't know, a bit more neurotic than they actually are. I think maybe it's a way to avoid challenge or something.
Yeah, I think you're completely right there. I think we have some kids who are so brave, and if you give them a challenge, they will hop to it straight away, won't they? And you have some children here. I think it's because...
Have you ever done that thing where you say, could I have a volunteer?
Yeah.
Before you can finish your sentence, before they know what they're volunteering, you get 10 hands up going, me.
Yeah, you just have this, it's the usual suspects though.
Completely, yeah.
Does it come down to parenting? Is the child too cuddled at home? Is it come down to us? Are we not challenging them enough, and are we not differentiating between each child enough? It's always a question, right? It's like, do we give them the space to be challenged in a way that they can build that confidence to be in the world and head to the unknown?
I like your idea about energy, and the children, they have it. Well, adults too, obviously. Yeah. Children have got it, and it's more about channeling it in the right place, in the right direction. So one thing I realised a few years ago, I got a boy. So again, actually, this was a different school, but actually it was year 4 again. I had a boy who was joining me, and in year 3, he'd not had a great year with his previous teacher. And he was, you know, some kids, they come to you, their reputation precedes them. Yeah. You know who they are, you know their name, blah, 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 before you've even really met them. And I was, in the transition stuff, I was told, you can be a real handful, and you've really got to watch him and everything and all that. And I realised very early on with this kid that he was what I call a celebrity. Yeah. When he came in the room, you had to acknowledge him one way or the other. It was he would never go and sit in the corner quietly and wait for an instruction. That just wasn't who he was. And frankly, I wasn't going to make him into that person in 9 months together. So I realised, okay, I've got this celebrity who's going to come in every day. It's up to me. He's going to be involved in the lesson. Yeah. He's got that energy. And it's up to me to make sure it's a positive thing rather than a negative, rather than in a negative way. And often, you're the teacher, you can control these things, you can find those chances and you can manufacture them. Yeah. Even if it's something like, I need someone to come to the front and be a volunteer I need someone to come and hold this for 30 seconds, or I need someone to hand this out for me, or take a message there, or to do this, that, and the other. And some jobs actually need doing, and some of them you kind of just make up. But with some kids, if they're not, if their energy isn't being involved in that way, isn't being channeled in a positive direction, you're just going to have a fight. You're going to have an argument with them. There's going to be a problem with them at some stage. I think it's about recognising it rather than wishing it weren't that. And some days I'd go in and, I may not be in the best mood or whatever, and this child would come in and they were having a very bad morning. And some days, my life would have been easier if they didn't have that energy they were bringing to the class. Yeah. But that was never an option. You can't eliminate it. You've got to work with what you've got. And the first step to working with it well is acknowledging it. Right?
Yeah. And I think you're completely right there. It's also like, usually those children, after you build a relationship with them, you can always say, hey, not today. Like, I'm not feeling that great. I'm not doing that well. And they're the most empathetic people, because you've given them time. You've taken the time to get to know them. You've taken the time to build a relationship with them. And usually they're confronted with either negative comments or negative faces and negative body language. But if you just come front up to them, hey, whatever his name was, hey, I'm not up for it today. Can we just try and just be?
That's when the relationship that's when the relationship pays off.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Now I'm going to flip that. I'm going to be like, let's call this devil's advocate here. Yeah. I'm going to flip that on its head. This is something I often see on educational Twitter when people are talking about behaviour.
Yeah.
And I think you hear it more from secondary school teachers. It seems like a common thing, SLT will tell a secondary school teacher who's having trouble with behaviour in their class. They'll say, you've just got to develop a relationship with this student.
Yeah.
You've just got to get a good relationship with that child, that pupil, and then the behaviour will come well.
Yeah.
And in primary school, that's more relevant, because generally speaking, we spend a lot more time with the kids. You can build more of a relationship. And in fact, in some ways, it's kind of the whole point of being the homeroom teacher, is you can build a relationship with them. But in secondary school, you're changing lessons several times a day, blah, blah, blah. You don't have the same way to build a relationship with them. And I think a lot of secondary teachers they think that's really condescending. They say, no, they should behave because basically we should expect children in this school to behave. That's not too much to ask.
Yeah.
They should be on time to their lessons, or they should, obviously put your own example in there. And relationships are great, but if the idea is I should only behave for you because you've got a relationship with me, that's not the best message to send to kids.
No.
I'm going to pause it now.
So I think in secondary school, they up there, and I teach secondary also, I tend to pretend and forget that I'm teaching 14-year-olds. And yes, they are secondary, and yes, we expect more from them. But again, they're 14-year-olds, and building a relationship with a 14-year-old is very similar to building a relationship with a Prep 6 or Prep 4 or Prep 5. You just go give them time of day and just talk to them. And I think if you don't talk to them and ask them why they're misbehaving, or give them what they need to be able to be successful, obviously they're not going to build a relationship with you, and obviously they're going to get disinterested with your subject. However, before you guys start hating on me, I am a PE teacher, and then I come from the side where I can run these kids and they'll be listening after. So I understand that. But
I guess, is it a time thing? Because a teacher might say, look, you're meant to be talking about stress and burnout here, and asking me to, I don't know, let's say you teach 5 different classes in the week, I don't know, whatever it is, you might have a couple of 100 kids every year. That changes. You can't expect me to get a relationship one-on-one with all of them and to talk with them all one-on-one and make that time. And I get that. I that sounds quite unrealistic. So what would you say in that situation?
I think it's really unrealistic to have a relationship with all of them. But I also think if you do the bare minimum, ask them how they are today and how they're feeling, and they can tell you, like we just said before about that problem child, no, not problem child, the celebrity.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Then if you ask the child, okay, why are you late? What's happening in your life? That will do wonders, I think. If you just show them that they are also a human being. They're not a student. They're not a number.
Yeah.
Their name and face, and they have their own personality. They have their own life, and you care. If you show that you care, they will also start to care for you.
I'm going to ask a different question here. Going back to burning out, we were talking about at the beginning.
Yeah.
What are the signs? How do you know you're just a bit stressed?
Yeah.
And how do you know it's something different? It's something worse.
I think, for me especially, the things I start to love and love doing, I start to hate. So, for example, if I am organizing events for like the school and the kids, and I am dreading the email that I need to send, I know it's coming on.
Right.
And I need to step away for a bit. Say, or if I'm coaching a session for the basketball team, for example, and I'm dreading going to that basketball session, I know I'm mid burnout because that's my thing. I love working with the children to get them better at something, and like that's the whole reason why I became a teacher, is because I just love seeing that improvement of we started here and now we're here, and now if that happens, then I know maybe it's time to take the foot off the pedal.
All right. And I'm going to, two things really here. I'm going to ask two questions at once.
Yeah.
What can teachers do themselves, but also what can schools do? And I'm asking those two together because if I start with saying, what can teachers do? I don't want to put it all on the person. Yeah, we're responsible for ourselves, of course we are. But I do think, we work in a school, we are employees.
Yeah.
Our employers do have certain obligations to us.
Yeah.
I mean, let's start with schools then. What can schools do around burnout?
I think schools should have regular check-ins. See how you're doing, or not formal check-ins, but like a safe space of like, hey, I understand you're doing this much at the moment, you good? Just the whole thing of someone from leadership coming and acknowledging, hey, are you good? And if you say I'm good, then they've done their duty. I think that does wonders. I know sometimes some people are like, if I admit that I'm not good, then it's a bigger problem.
Is it a trick?
Yeah,
Are they asking me this because if I say, I'm struggling a bit with something, they go, well, maybe they're not really up to the task.
Or having a person who's like a safeguarding lead for teachers, or a well-being lead for teachers, just saying, hey, maybe you're doing too much, or I noticed this something, you're doing a lot. Are you okay? I think that's one of the ways we could do it. Or just have HR come in just have a chat.
Yeah, I guess it's tricky because especially in lots of schools, the person who is, even if they've got a TLR or they've got a special role for well-being or, people's looking after people, again, they'll often have 1,000,001 other things to do in that day. They might be a full-time class teacher themselves, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So it's finding the time for it. And this is a question that I know some people won't like, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but I genuinely am curious because I feel I've seen it in other teachers. Do we have a bit of a problem with martyrs in teaching? Does teaching tend to attract your sort of martyr complex types, the sorts of people who think, if I'm stressed, if I'm really, really struggling, it's because I care, and caring is all about investing yourself. And if I'm feeling too relaxed, or I have too much time to have a coffee in the staff room, I'm not really doing my job, and I should be pushing myself to do more. And that the sort of the emotional toll of the job is sort of what a caring person does. I feel I do see that. I'm caricaturing a bit, but I feel I do see that in teaching more, I suspect, than in lots of other professions.
Yeah, I think so. We had a joke last year about who cared the most.
Yeah,
and
I think I won that.
Yeah, I think you did. You established that you care more, and sometimes when he didn't care that much, I won.
Don't remember that.
But I think it is. I think we were joking about how much overtime we were putting in compared to other people, and then we were both joking about how overworked we were. But I think you and I both are just have this like, okay, we need to be working or else we're not working.
You can say we're both just good people.
Good people, yeah.
May I say better people than
we just care more about our colleagues.
Yeah, exactly.
Than everyone else.
Yeah.
But I think it's healthy and not healthy at the same time.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Schools Week focuses on calls from the charity Youth Endowment Fund to give every school a Violence Against Women and Girls lead. The article, which can be found on the Schools Week website, also features the results of a poll which suggests 1 in 8 teachers have reported sexual assaults between pupils. The survey by TeacherTap on behalf of the charity found that 13% reported a child sexually assaulting another child in the past term. 45% of secondary teachers said they lacked confidence in teaching how to intervene if pupils witness a sexual assault. 55% of the same group also cited a lack of confidence or expertise as the main barrier to delivering PSHE and relationship, sex and health education. The Labour government has pledged to halve violence against women and girls within a decade, but the Youth Endowment Foundation said this required clear, targeted action. This should also include a £1 million investment to pilot a Violence Against Women and Girls lead training grant across 50 schools, colleges and alternative provision settings. £35 million, the charity says, should then be spent to scale up the initiative if it shows success. £100 million should be spent over 5 years to deliver evidence-based violence reduction programmes for children most at risk. The charity further said pupil premium spending guidance should be updated to explicitly encourage schools to invest in evidence-based violence reduction strategies. John Yates, the CEO of the YEF, said, over the past decade, schools have led the charge in breaking down the stigma around mental health, and that with the right resources, training and leadership, they would have similar transformative impact. Full details of his comments and more results from the Teacher Tap survey are on the Schools Week website. In related news, BBC Scotland news site focuses on calls by unions for primary school pupils to be educated in the dangers of hate speech from online influencers. At its annual conference in Glasgow, NASUWT President David Anderson said racism and misogyny is a growing concern in schools, and more needs to be done to tackle it. The union calls for early education because by secondary school, many pupils have already been exposed to far-right narratives. It says parents assume extremist influences are only affecting secondary pupils, but in reality, this is not the case. In 2023, Police Scotland launched a new strategy to tackle abuse with a section on dealing with incels, those who were involuntary celibate, defining incel culture as an ideology where women are to blame for the lack of intimate relationships. Mr. Anderson said in his speech, "We see the changes in broader society in the classroom conduct of pupils, and that abusive rhetoric by politicians is also trickling down. The Scottish Government said schools should be safe for all pupils and staff." The plan by Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson to recruit the extra teachers has been funded by adding VAT to private school fees and is one of the cornerstones of education policy. However, a report by the National Audit Office warned that a projected increase in secondary school pupil numbers was likely to outpace recruitment and leave teacher vacancies unfilled. Further education colleges, already badly affected by recruitment and retention crises, will need up to 12,400 more teachers by 2028. The number of newly qualified teachers who started in state secondary schools in 2023 fell to 8,700, the lowest number since 2010, and the Department for Education has missed its recruitment target for secondary training in all but one of the past 10 years. The National Audit Office called on the government to publish a delivery plan outlining how it intends to recruit the additional teachers within the timeframe and urged ministers to assess the extent to which the further education workforce model is fit for purpose. Responding to the NAO report, Ms Phillipson reiterated the government's commitment, saying, "We're already seeing green shoots with 2,000 more secondary school teachers training this year. But there is still more to do." Finally, BBC Business News covers the difficulties faced by young graduates in getting a job, with some frustrated at being turned down for roles at supermarkets. The British Retail Consortium told the BBC young people would be hardest hit by the falling jobs market, as UK vacancies are at their lowest level in 4 years. One graduate with a degree in accounting and finance and a master's in management said she had gone through Aldi's recruitment process only to be told there was no suitable vacancy. Since January 2024, she said she had applied for around 2,000 roles. Another told the BBC, "I finished my degree and can't find one job within the field I studied for." And a third said, "Young people aren't fussy. We literally can't even get hired cleaning toilets." In February, data showed that more 16 to 24-year-olds were not in work, education or training at the end of 2024 than at any point in the past 11 years. A government spokesperson said its new youth guarantee was providing every 18 to 21-year-old in England with access to an apprenticeship, quality training and education opportunities. The article on the website also lists 6 top tips for finding work. These can be found on BBC Business News. This has been Teachers Talk Radio News with Joe Fox.
All right, Ginny, good news. I've just made you the head teacher of a school. You have total power over everyone in the school, as I'm sure real heads do, maybe. But you get to do 3 new things to manage stress, well-being, burnout of your staff. What would they be?
So, the 3 new things I would bring in is, well, I've never been in a school where a staff member will be allocated well-being days. So, no questions asked. They will have a set of well-being days throughout the year to just deal with anything that's on their mind. If they're exhausted and need some time out, take a well-being day, no questions asked. Mm-hmm. Or if you want to do some life admin stuff that you don't want to do over your holiday, take a well-being day, because that's well-being. Mm-hmm. I think why do the big Fortune 500 companies can do it? Why can't teachers, the people that take care of the people who work in those companies, why can't we get them?
I thought the life admin point. I know, like most teachers, the first week of your summer holidays, that's your dentists, your opticians, whatever it is, all the fun things that you sort of put off until then. Yeah. I get that. But then, of course, someone listening might say, oh yeah, but teachers, they get so much holiday anyway. Yeah. That's the time for all of that. And term time is just for knuckling down and getting on with it. No, you can't have a well-being day. What would you say to that?
I say to them, yeah, we do get very good holidays, but however, most of the people who work 9 to 5 are not working with human beings, young human beings that you are trying to mold into people that can go into society and make the world a better place.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I always say, if anyone ever really bangs on about the holiday thing, and I think they're being serious, but I always just say, well, you do it then. Like if it's such a racket, right? If it's such a good deal, if teachers are getting away with daylight robbery with their holidays, why doesn't everyone do it? If it's so good, why aren't you doing it? Anyway, so I derailed you there, but well-being day is number 1. Okay, what's next, Ted?
What's next? I think time and lieu too. I think a lot of us do a lot of overtime.
Well, PE, right?
Yeah.
You PE teachers, you're notorious for it.
Yeah, we are. But I think the whole factor of the thing comes in. I consider myself quite lucky. You don't work a day when you love what you do. I think most teachers love what they do, but for me personally, I tend to just go to I will personally never take a day in lieu, because I would rather be with the kids than be sat at home doing nothing. I think time in lieu maybe considered as off timetable time, off contact time.
Right. Okay.
As in, I'd rather be in here doing something productive with my day instead of vegetating.
That does make a lot more sense, because of course it's one thing for a school. I mean, if you're just not in, you're not in. But if you're in but you're planning you're still working. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So that'll be for me personally, that will help with my well-being. I just burn out, because I tend to, when we get to a busy period, I tend to have everything pile up on me. And the third thing, most importantly, would be access to a counselor that isn't connected at any point in time to the school. A funny fact, I've had an issue with a past job where they provided counseling and counseling for staff, and it came out that everything that was being said in said conversations, which are supposed to be confidential, were being told to the bosses. And when it came to contract negotiation times, that type of stuff came out. So I don't really trust the system when it comes to...
it's making the counsellor idea sound a little less...
Yeah, but I think it's an independent counsellor.
Sure.
That you could do online or in person.
Yeah.
I think someone to chat to about to put it in perspective of someone needs to go, someone outside the profession going, well, that's too much or that's too little.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I think informally we find that, like you find that person or those people in your personal life. Lots of people do, you know, if you're married or whatever. I'm sure every single spouse of every single teacher in the world hears about their work, you know, on a daily basis. And, you know, obviously it's either your family members, your friends or whoever. And it can be quite a lot to put on people in, you know, an informal, like in a relationship. So to have someone who knows what they're doing to listen. I see that.
It's also like if someone has a disclosure, right? We legally can't tell our spouses.
Sure.
But if it's,
you have to be, you know, keep anonymity, protecting you know, the identities of who you're talking about. Sure.
Yeah, and all that type of thing. It's just we can tell about.
Well, I can still complain about like there not being enough blue tack or something.
Yeah,
that's
anyone
can hear about that.
Yeah.
I'll tweet about that. That's kind of brave person I am.
But I think there's a situation where there needs to be a professional where if we do get a disclosure, we need someone to talk about it because it's heavy because we've chose this life, but it still becomes an issue where when there's a disclosure from a kid, it still weighs on you heavily because you obviously care about the child, right?
Of course, yeah.
And if we can't talk about it to each other because this is no one's business because the child is disclosed and there's a safeguarding needs, yes?
Of course, yeah.
But the safeguarding needs can't really talk about it because they're not professionally trained about it in counselling, and there needs to be an outlet where we had this chat about negative energy, like bad and good energy. We need that negative energy to go to somewhere. We need to release it, right? And why not have someone who's a professional to be able to talk about what you've experienced or what you're experiencing with a child that you care about. So.
Yeah, I mean, when you think of the cumulative, you know, if you think back over your career and you really try and remember all of the things that have been disclosed to you over that time, there can be some really horrible stuff in there, right? You know, and the effect of it, it's obviously terrible for the child it's happening to, and the people really directly involved. But there is. It can take its toll hearing that stuff, you know, especially when you sometimes you can do things about it, but not always. No. Sometimes you just have to listen, and that's that can be very heavy.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, we're the children's counsellor, but we're going on us as teachers, who's there for us when.
Well, don't you find it's interesting? I mean, I got this definitely on my training a bit. I don't know if it's intentional, but I feel a lot of therapy speak, a lot of kind of medicalized terms, they sort of make their way into teachers' vocabulary.
Yeah.
And I often hear teachers, I don't know, they'll talk about like trauma-informed practice or something like that. And like, on the one hand, I get it. I totally understand that if someone's had terrible things happen to them, we need to be mindful and aware of that and everything. But I also really want, like, we aren't, well, sure some of us are, but most of us are not trained medical professionals.
No.
You know, and it would be quite irresponsible of us to act like we were. You might think, it's in the best interest of the child. But sometimes you have to simply say, okay, I hear you, I will take my concerns to someone else, but I can't be I can't be an off-the-cuff therapist.
Yeah.
That doesn't do anyone
any
favours. You know. But yeah. All right, okay. So in your perfect school, we've got well-being days, time and lieu, and sort of counselling for staff. But what about the kids? What sort of initiatives would you have for them about stress and that sort of thing?
I think, first and foremost, I think every school nowadays, if they can afford it, should have an on-site counsellor for older children and younger children. Obviously, younger children, there needs to be less, but it's still a very specialized position. But I think especially for the older children, they're going through so much anyway and thinking about so much anyway. There needs to be people on site that they can go and talk to, or parents give permission to go talk to because they see these changes at home. I think first and foremost we need that. That's someone to talk to. And like, I know some people don't believe in therapy, but as a person that went through some counseling, it's probably one of the best decisions I've made to go through counseling.
Let me ask you on that, because I know some schools will have a person who's appointed, like a teacher, and they'll have a TLR, right? So it'll be like an extra role they do.
Yeah.
Do you think that works? Do you think it's better to have a teacher who does it as well, or do you think there should be the one person and counselling is their job?
I don't think, because like, I think a counsellor, you're going to have a good relationship with them. And the counsellor will have a good relationship with you, but at the end of the day, they're there for you to talk to, and they're there to give you exercises for yourself to become a better regulated person. I don't think a teacher who has a full teaching load as a TLR is able to separate teacher and counselor. It's just unfair, and I think it's such a important role in society now that if we're addressing mental health issues in children and in adults, if we're talking about the children specifically, we need professionals to help us out.
Sure. All right. So you've got your counsellors in place, counsellors for teachers, for kids. Great. What else for the kids?
What else? I really think the benefit, this is my PE teacher now, is outdoor learning.
Oh yeah.
Outdoor learning, either you just go outside to read, either you do like a math lesson outside, but something you do outside, go for a nature walk and then write a poem in a park or something, or write a poem in a garden or something like that. It does more better than harm. The term that the kid, like young people say, I think I'm quite old, but they say touch grass, and I think
Right.
I think
I only learned what that was pretty recently. Would you mind explaining that to our listeners, who I'm sure will definitely know what it means, but may need a reminder.
So when young people nowadays, video games are so popular, so they just stay at home and play video games. The term touching grass is literally you go outside and touch grass, or you just go outside and take some fresh air and not stay in your stinky room the whole time.
It's getting off the internet.
Yeah, getting off the internet.
Yeah. I get that. I mean, so the one thing that is very live debate right now is banning phones in school, or what to do with that. Do you have a view on that?
Banning, it's like taking away, it's like, white knuckling, as they call it in addiction terms. They white knuckle their addiction from phones for 8 hours a day, and the rest of the time they're on their phones. So do we teach them moderation, or do we just say ban phones in this place? I don't have a strong view in it. I'm on both sides. Yes, they need the phone to survive in this society. We're in Japan now. We need to survive in a society where we need phones. Yeah, they need phones for everything. Trains, public transport, buses. So they need their phones.
And it's certainly okay.
And not every child here has a working iPad or computer, and they need the phones to do filming or do whatever they need. On the other hand, we don't want to give them the addiction.
And you obviously don't want, I mean, adults anyway, every single person who owns a phone at some point has found it in their hand, just staring at it.
Yeah.
Not knowing why you're on it, not enjoying it, you're just looking at it, and then you suddenly think, wait, what's it doing here? What am I doing? And that's like an adult who's trying to get something else done. If you're a teenager, you're 15 years old, and you've got something going on with your friends or whatever. Of course you're gonna put it in your pocket and put it out and look at it underneath the table or something. I know. So I do think schools have to be pretty clear about how distracting they are, and they will always, as long as they're present, they will always be a distraction. I don't think there's a way to sort of have it out or have it available and not have it detracting from learning. Unless, of course, as you say, the learning is an activity based on recording or whatever it might be. However, whether they're in school or not, I don't know. I think that's for schools to work out, and whether they're in a sort of locker or in a bag or put away or something. But certainly, I think if they're at all accessible I think we've tried that, and some schools have tried that for a few years now.
Yeah.
And I don't see any way that works.
I've been on a few residentials. Residentials are camps.
Okay.
For the people who are listening, I think you know what residentials.
Yeah, sure.
We basically banned phones, but it's quite sad.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
I think you know what residentials.
Yeah, sure.
We basically banned phones, but it's quite sad to see that children nowadays, mostly, not all of them, don't know how to communicate with each other without their phones. So much of their media, so much of what they talk about is on their phones.
Right.
It takes about 2 or 3 days for them to acclimatize to, actually, hey, this is my friend that I call my best friend. I want to talk to her or him.
Yeah.
But I need to talk about something. So residentials are so good because you're busy all the time and you're talking about other things. But it's quite sad when you have meals in total silence because everyone's used to just what that. Basically, every kid's iPad kid nowadays, aren't they?
Right. Yeah.
And they're used to
so
just
used to
watching.
having a screen in front of them.
Yeah. It's I think a balance of maybe we just have to live with trying to get them controlled under the influence of phones.
I sometimes wonder, we say about the balance and the control. I sort of feel with most new technologies, there's a time when it's free and it's completely unrestricted. So there was once upon a time, very long time ago, when movies, when they were still relatively new, there was no control of the content. They just were put out there and you could buy or sell them or whatever. Everyone knows that in the 19th century Coca-Cola used to have cocaine in it and things like that. And then these things get, legislation comes in. Well, people's opinions and attitudes change. The norms change. The laws change as well. And to a subsequent generation, it seems mad that people were ever so loose with it in the past. I think the biggest change we've all seen in the last, depending where you are in the world, but last few years is smoking, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think kids nowadays, they get quite surprised sometimes if they see someone smoking or they see a cigarette in the hand of a person. You know, I'm from a time when you could sort of smoke in pubs and restaurants, but you definitely didn't smoke. You smoked in some places, but not in other places. Yeah. And of course, my parents' generation, it was kind of, as far as I can tell, you could smoke absolutely any way you wanted all the time. It was encouraged.
And it was just fake news that it causes lung cancer.
Right. Exactly. So, anyway, so my point is, I always wonder whether in 50 years or 100 years, and okay, it's always a stupid idea to make a prediction like this. You'll always look like an idiot, but I'm going to do it anyway. In 50 years or 100 years, people will look back on how we just gave kids the internet. We just said, here you go, here's a device which will let you literally access anything online. Okay, some people put restrictions on it. I get that, but largely that is what's happening for many kids, and they'll think, what on earth were they thinking? What were the people in the 2010s and the 2020s? What were they playing at, giving children phones that could access the internet and without any kind of obvious control over it?
I remember talking to one of the school counselors with the old school I used to work at, that it isn't really about what content they see, is how they perceive that content.
Right. Okay.
So like all our kids here have watched both seasons of Squid Game.
Right. Okay.
Which is very sexually charged, very violent, and there's blood and murder all over that. Talks about some very adult issues like drugs, sex, debt, threat of life and everything. Is they always say, like, it's how they take it on, but I'm also in the view of, why are we exposing children to this content that they shouldn't even be exposed to at the moment?
I think it's very hard to. I mean, there will always be horrible stuff out there, and I think obviously pre-internet, we knew there were people who would say terrible things and stuff, but it was just much harder to come across, and you kind of thought that it was only a very small. If you had to put a number on it, it was a very small number of humans out there, whereas. You see, it's so easy to find hateful stuff online. And I'm not saying it is loads and loads of people, but it feels like it is. If you scroll X or whatever it might be, or Google any hot button issue, and it always feels like the extremes is the norm. And so therefore they're not extreme anymore. And I don't know if it really is. But that's the feeling. And also I get that as an adult who remembers the pre-internet world. So I can't imagine what it's like if you've only ever known this.
Yeah. It's always that thing of like, the loudest person in the room is always going to be heard, right?
Right, yeah.
And the loudest person in the room is point, like bad or good, is always going to be the point that you always remember.
Well, as they say, sorry, I can't help it. As we're in Japan, people always bring up, it's such a cliche, but there's probably something to it. People always say about Japan that the Western proverb is the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and the proverb here is the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. I know what you mean. The loudest gets heard, the extreme always gets the attention. And it's more entertaining. It's more entertaining to hear people yell at each other.
It's just what makes people click on, right?
I mean, while we're on it, just because this is something that I've heard lots of people talk about recently, really toxic stuff, especially for young men, boys, teenagers, whatever. Andrew Tate, that sort of stuff. Like, what do you do with that? Sorry, I'm giving you all the tough challenges. I made you head of the school like 20 minutes ago. You probably thought it was a great promotion. What wonderful thing it's going to be. And now I'm asking you to literally sort out every single issue.
Andrew Tate is basically the extreme of masculinity, isn't he? He's just the extreme end of what a traditional man's supposed to be. And
sorry, some podcast I heard the other day. I think it might have been Jimmy Carr who said this. Something like, if Donald Trump is a poor person's idea of what a rich person should be, Andrew Tate is a sort of teenage boy's idea of what a man should be. Like, it's like you say, it's the exaggerate, it's a comic effect.
It's exactly what you said, the comic effect. it's what a teenage boy who, I think some of our boys even idolize him here. It's just he's popular YouTuber, and in that space, it's always about who says the most extreme stuff to get clicks.
Yeah, totally.
How do we combat it? That's a tough question, because that means we're controlling what the kids watch. And
Exactly. And to an extent, it's also controlling what they think, to some extent as well. I mean, it comes from a good place. You don't want them to think hateful, terrible things. But also, I mean, you know, people will have opinions you disagree with. And, sorry, I mean, that's a very bad way of putting it. That's not what I mean. But what I do mean is simply being exposed to some terrible idea. Is that enough to make you... Does that warrant banning it entirely, or is it better to talk about it and just expose it for how ridiculous it is? I mean, what part of me wonders with stuff like Andrew Tate, I like to believe this, that some of it is just teenagers doing what teenagers have always done, which is annoy and wind up and worry, you know, their elders. And I don't like to say that because it makes me feel quite old, but I suppose it's, you know, right, it does work. the numbers check out. To a teenager, I am very much an old person. Great. And, you know, the idea that 15-year-olds are listening to these messages and sort of getting on board with it is both horrifying and completely, it's very hard for us to understand. It's a generation gap. But then I think part of being a teenager is to consciously or subconsciously wind up your elders, and I'm not saying that's the only thing that's going on here, but that must be part of it.
I think it's, if we come in with a negative spin on it, young people usually tend to rebel against what we say, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. Me, I was saying, well, you shouldn't listen to this man, he's awful.
Yeah.
Is that going to work?
No, it's the whole thing of drugs is bad.
Yeah, just say no. Right?
Just say no is not enough. You need to, because obviously, if you say no to a teenager, no means yes in their world. It's I'm going to go take it just out of rebellion because.
And a few who maybe haven't watched this stuff will go, oh, I'll go do it now. I'll go find out what the fuss is about.
Yeah, I think what our job is, because we're educators, and parents' job really, is that there needs to be conversation. There needs to be, on both sides, an open mind. Not like we try to understand what the teenagers are thinking, and also and we try to explain our thinking of being more experienced and being more experienced of the world and being seen and heard a lot more things than in our 30 years of life compared to their 15.
Thank you for saying 30. That's great. Yeah, I'll take that.
It's just explaining that.
And you've got to do it. And you've got to leverage your experience, because you do have more experience than, of course you do, but also not sound too
condescending.
Yeah, that's it.
Too condescending. I think it's a funny balance of being that mentorship type role with young people, but it's also at the end of the day, they just have to live life for themselves. We can give them and educate them as much as we can. If they want to, it's like the whole saying: if you bring a horse to water, you can't force it to drink. If they want to take it on, they can take it on, and we will never say no to a young person, but we can try our best, and if they're not going to take it on, we can't possibly do anything. Right?
Yeah. I think that's what I'd articulated it very badly for, but I think that's what I was trying to get to with the thinking there. We can't do their thinking for them.
No.
We have to sort of, like you say, leaning almost towards it. We've got to guide them to better thinking, I guess.
Better thinking,
however you want to put it. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to try and let's have a more positive turn here.
Okay.
Different question.
Yeah.
What gives you hope about the future of education?
I think education now we had this discussion, I think yesterday or this morning in the staff room. Well, me personally, I hated school from year 1 to year 13, because I went through the A-level GCSE system, and I absolutely despised school. The only thing that kept me in school was sport, and I kept with it because I love sport, and I never missed a day of PE. But nowadays, I see that kids, everyone loves school. They like every school I've worked at, they want to come. It's fun. It's engaging. It's these kids are happy. They're being educated with a positive mindset and open, they're being engaged with an open mind. They promoted open-mindedness and just thinking of accepting other people's opinions, but you don't have to take their opinions on, but they can accept them. I think in the older years especially, they're working really hard. However, they're still enjoying life at school. So they're still here. They still want to come be with their friends. Yes, they're teenagers. They're going to say they hate it. But
teenagers will always say that.
Yeah. But
no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one thing always makes me laugh is I feel like probably the biggest cultural constant I've ever seen, the one thing that I think, unites all people across the world is if you ever see a family holiday, right? If you're ever out somewhere and you see mum, dad, whoever with the kids, if there's a teenager with them, no matter how nice the holiday, no matter how beautiful the surroundings, the teenager will be absolutely hating it and just looking so miserable, no matter where they are or what they're doing.
And photos too. They all make it a point.
Yes.
I actually was one of those teenagers.
Surely not.
But that's what makes me hopeful. It's the enjoyment of education. I think if education goes on through this point and there's people in this world that promotes lifelong learning and promotes funny education, these people, we won't have situations of people getting manipulated by media. We'll have open-minded people with their own thinking and their own opinions.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
Hi secondary school teachers, we're Apps for Good, and we give schools like yours free introductory computing courses. Our courses are for everyone, including those who aren't computing teachers, and they're fully equipped with resources mapped to the UK computing curriculums. Independent learning is central to our courses. Your students will develop essential and digital skills by working in teams to create prototype apps. We'll even connect you with industry volunteers to give real-world feedback. Let's empower every young person you teach to shape their future with technology. Speak to us at www.appsforgood.org.
Did you know that every year, half of disadvantaged children who are top attainers at primary school don't go on to achieve top GCSE maths results? At Axiom Maths, we exist to change that. Our fully funded program helps schools nurture young mathematicians through weekly face-to-face maths circles, where pupils tackle challenging and exciting problems outside the national curriculum. With just under £3,000 annual funding, expert training and quality resources, we give schools everything they need to inspire the next generation of mathematical thinkers. Want to make a difference? Visit axiommaths.com today and join over 400 schools delivering maths circles across the UK.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
Manipulated by media. We'll have open-minded people with their own thinking and their own opinions.
So if I'm hearing you right, if you were to start all again now, if we sent you back to reception year one, obviously as a child, not as a man in his first as a 30-year-old man, you would enjoy it, you think?
I think if I started in kindergarten and in nowadays school, I think I would enjoy it a lot more. Yeah.
So what is the change then? Because I get that you're feeling very positive about it and everything, but like what is different?
I think kids have more ownership of what they're doing. I think as teachers we listen a bit more to what the children are interested in. Obviously we promote our own interests to foster their own interest in the subject.
Yeah. I mean, you can't be interested in what you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? And sometimes we have to. Sometimes I think our job is to tell them about stuff that they don't know about yet because they're 9 years old or they're 12 years old or whatever it is. But I do totally accept as well that they have their own curiosity. They do know about some things, and hooking them in is definitely something that you can do.
Yeah, I think sometimes you have to reel it in a little bit, because I think I had someone say what was it? Something that looked like a Pokemon was real. What was it last year for exhibition? They were like,
oh, well, they were convinced like a Pokemon was real or something. Yeah.
Something mythical was real.
Oh, okay.
Like a unicorn or a dragon.
Right. Okay.
And you have to.
Was that sea creature?
Yeah.
Loch Ness monster or something like that.
It was yeah. It was
anyway, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't a kraken, but I think sometimes when it comes to that, you gotta love the imagination. You gotta love the creativity.
Yeah.
However, you also need to be like, right as of right now, there's no evidence that it's ever been existed, right?
Right.
There's evidence. Is there evidence where megalodons are real, right? There's evidence.
Yeah.
But that certain creature wasn't real.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. There's times when always makes me think of when I was a student, when I was training. One of the things, it was like a habit. It got drilled into us. Is that, in fact, I think I was told it as my feedback for one of the lessons. They said, lesson was all right, but when children give you the right answer, you've got to praise them. And I'm like, I can say good. And they said, no, don't say good, say great or excellent or brilliant. And like, don't get me wrong, I think I do that quite a lot, and I think it's good generally. But sometimes when the answer is like a really basic one, right? When it's not 2 + 2 or something, whatever it is, or what day is it today, or how do we spell this month or something. I sometimes feel it's very hollow going over the top. And the link I'm trying to make here is you can respect what children are interested in without, sort of faking it. And if it's genuinely interesting, great, go with it. But on the other hand, if they're saying just something that's not categorically wrong, you sometimes have to say, no, it is actually wrong, mate. Sorry. I know you like it to be true, but it's not.
No. Yes. I had a child to me was debating if Harry Potter was real and if Hermione Granger was real. And it's not a non-fiction book. It's not an autobiography of Harry Potter's life. It's Harry Potter.
Can I check, what age was this child?
This child was in the prep 3.
Oh, okay, so we're talking 7 to 8 years old then.
Yes.
So probably should have realised that Hogwarts isn't an actual school you can go to. And
to be fair, you can go to Hogwarts now, can't you?
Yeah. Fair enough. All right.
Hogwarts is real, people.
There we go. Well, we've all learned something here. I know we don't have a lot of time left. So, now, I know we've talked already about what schools can do for teachers, but let's go to self-care now. What teachers, what we can do for ourselves. What do you think the most underrated form of self-care is? And I say underrated because it might be something that people know about, but maybe we need to call attention to it.
I had a meeting with my personal project people in year 4 people in the UK, year 10. They're doing personal project. It's physical activity.
Right.
I think everyone knows about the benefits of physical activity. I know, don't hate me on this, but
I will, don't worry.
I think people underestimate how much a nature walk does to the brain. I'm not saying go out and beast yourself. I'm saying literally just go out for a nature walk. Or if you live in a big city,
touch grass
somewhere. Just go sit in the park. Or if you just want to put your foot into a river, do it. I think just being able to move your body for about 30 minutes a day, doing just walking or just playing a game of
just being outside.
Just being
right?
outside,
Yeah. As they used to say when we were kids, right? Go outside, get some fresh air, and all of that. And I, that's a good one for being underrated, because it seems so obvious, but people forget to do it.
Yeah.
And people don't make the time to do it. I knew a teacher once who every single lunchtime without fail would go, and it was an hour lunch break, and she would just go, boom, straight out the school and go for a proper walk, not like 5-10 minutes, but she'd sort of stride for, 45 minutes or so. Now, maybe she was just doing it because maybe she just hated her colleagues and didn't want to talk to us at lunchtime.
Yeah, probably that.
Probably
hated you,
But she'd come back and then, have lunch very quickly before going straight back into class. But she always, she was experienced and she knew what she was doing. And I never saw her get annoyed or get really burned out or like snap at people or get or any of that stuff. She seemed to have it all in control. Yeah. Obviously that wasn't the only reason why, but I think that tells you something. It's like the way you've heard this idea that if you give, I don't know what the statistic is, but most people, if you give them a course of medicine, they very often don't actually complete it. If the doctor gives you pills for 2 weeks, people will do it for 3 or 4 days and go, oh, I feel a bit better, and they can't really be bothered, or they forget to take them, or they don't do what they should. Or, the doctor tells you to rest that leg for 2 weeks, so you rest it for about 2 days and then go back to walking on it. But pet owners never do that with their pets, right? If a vet says, here's a course of medication for your dog, they do it. They give it to their dog for the whole time. Ditto for any other care they need. So the point I'm making is, we know what to do, we just don't do it for ourselves a lot of the time. We know exactly. We do know what will make us feel good, how to manage stress. It's just, we don't do it. And the answer of why, the question of why is, I don't know what the answer is. I wish I did.
For me, it's just, I just get my own way all the time. I just make excuses not to be active or be taking care of myself. I just make excuses. You become your own worst enemy sometimes, don't you? I always go in my head, I deserve to just veg out on the couch just because I've worked so many days in a row. And I'm like, nah, why? You know what I mean? It's just, why do that to yourself? Yes, you're tired, but why do that to yourself? Because you know that you need to be active to be happy. That's for me. And I'm taking away my happiness just because maybe I'm throwing a tantrum. Maybe I'm. You get a cycle, don't you? Sometimes, if you're really annoyed, you don't always do the thing. I think there's another. I know I talked about therapy speak earlier, but I think this is from the TV show The Sopranos. So I'm going to quote it as a source. We don't do what's good for us. We do what's familiar. Right? That's what people go to. They don't always sit down and rationally think through all the best options. They'll just do what's habitual. And that's it. And the habits that you see it in the kids. Even the habits that some kids have now, you think, you probably might have that for the rest of your life. I can see you doing what you're doing now when you're 5. I can see you doing that when you're 50. And it's hard to break the cycle, but I think that's what we're here for, right?
And habits can be good as well as bad. It's not always a bad thing. In fact, very much you can see kids doing things when they're young and you think, God, yes, please do keep doing that throughout your life. I really hope you do. And you're right, we can teach those good habits as well as hopefully try to get them out of the bad ones as well. I know we're running out of time here. So, Mr. Lee, what are you going to do tonight to manage your stress?
What I'm going to do tonight to manage my stress is I'm going to go coach basketball, which I love. And I usually
lovely and wholesome. That's brilliant. I am going to go have a drink. But,
and I think I'm going to go for a swim because I've just joined the gym to go swimming because I love swimming.
Beautiful.
I think those are the 2 things that I've come to realize that I've started to miss, and I'm going to do some coaching and I'm going to go take care of my body by swimming.
That's fantastic. Well, I'm still going to have my drink, but now I feel a little bit guilty about it. No, I wasn't going to. So, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Oh, thanks for appearing. That's been great. Thank you very much for coming on.
No problem.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.